welcome to Ground Control Parenting, a blog and now a podcast created for parents raising Black and brown children. Why Ground Control Parenting? Because we're not trying to be helicopter parents, but we do need to be on that tarmac, that ground control crew, making sure our children have what they need for a successful takeoff. I'm the creator and your host, Carol Sutton Lewis. In this podcast series, I'll be talking with some really interesting people about the job and the joy of parenting. I am so excited that our guest today is my dear friend Crystal McCrary McGuire. Crystal is an award-winning film director and producer, a best-selling author, an attorney, and she's mom to 3 children, Cole Anthony, who is 19, Ella Anthony, 17, and Leo McGuire, 7. Welcome to Ground Control Parenting, Crystal. So excited to have you here.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here, Carol.
Well, you are such a perfect guest for our podcast because you can talk about parenting little kids and big kids, the whole spectrum. So first, I just want to say a little bit more about your children. Your eldest son, Cole, who's a freshman at the University of North Carolina, is a star basketball player for the North Carolina Tar Heels, and he has NBA recruiters already anxiously awaiting his eligibility for the draft. Your daughter, Ella, a high school junior, she's a junior?
Senior.
Senior? Wow, I'm dating myself. She's a senior now.
It went fast.
It did go really quickly. Is a standout basketball player as well, and she has serious hoop dreams as she considers college and beyond. At 7, Leo definitely knows his way around the court, but for now he's going to stay in school. First grade? Second grade?
First grade. Leo's a chess player.
Oh.
Actually.
Oh,
yes, he's
okay,
a strategist.
Cool. Okay, great. So I mention this all because I want to talk to you about a little later, among other things, raising children who have intense passions, and particularly a child who has from an early age. But first, I want to start with a little bit of your backstory. So, as a way to begin these podcast conversations, I like to cite some parenting advice that I often give. I say it's important to parent the child that you have, not the child you were or the one you want. So let's first talk about the child you were, little Crystal McCrary. Tell me about your family growing up.
Wow. Well, I think, like most people, my upbringing was complex. Mm-hmm. And each of us have our own complexities and family dynamics as loving as they can be. I grew up in Detroit, Michigan. I was raised by my maternal grandparents. My biological mother had me at a very young age and basically was not really able to take care of me and, left me with my grandparents, who I call mom and dad. Mm-hmm. And so I was with them for the first 6-7 years of my life. And at that time, my biological mother started returning and popping back into the scene, and which was traumatic for a variety of reasons and confusing, for a 6-year-old. And I just basically knew my grandparents as my mom and dad. But of course, we had bonded, and they had done all of the nurturing and the heavy lifting and the loving and the vacations and the reading the books every night to me. So in some respects, it was sort of whipsaw because my, grandparents / parents really were like a Black June and Ward Cleaver. She was a school teacher, then a principal at a public school in Detroit. My dad, served in World War II, came back, worked for Ford Motor Company for 40 years. So that was sort of my background. So what I would say, carrying it forward into adulthood, I had 2 models of parents. I had, on one hand, my grandparents, who to me were the ideal. Mm-hmm. And then I had periods of time where I was with my biological mother, who I called Vicky, or occasionally Mom, because she would, try to make me call her Mom. And I never knew her that way. Mm-hmm. I hadn't bonded with her in that way, which was in a very unstable background when I did spend time with her. I mean, she had substance abuse issues. She had all sorts of crazy characters coming in and out of her life that was just very confusing and destabilizing and scary, frankly, for me as a kid. So I always knew, when I had kids, if I was, able to have kids, which I was blessed to be able to have 3, that, it's kind of extreme to say this, but I always felt like I knew what I thought were the best type of parents,
Mm-hmm.
and I knew what I didn't want to be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, it is, I often say, and this is proof positive, that one parents in part the way that they were parented. If you had a great childhood, you parent towards that. And if you had not a great child, you parent away from that. But you're the first person I've met that has managed to have both. But fortunately, it sounds like that you're living with your grandparents. I mean, I know you to refer to them as mom and dad.
Yes.
And so their imprint was the imprint that lasted.
Yes, indeed.
And so that's actually a tribute to the early years too, because from 0 to 7, you knew the core, you developed the core of your, the loving, the caring. And so regardless of what happened afterwards, that wasn't taken away from you. So
that's right. I definitely had a really solid foundation
Mm-hmm.
from them. You know, the breakfast together every morning, dinner together every evening,
Mm-hmm.
Vacations. I mean, we ran like clockwork.
Mm-hmm.
Church every Sunday, birthdays celebrated like clockwork. It was a very structured but loving and nurturing environment.
And, you know, that reminds me of another issue that I think about a lot, and that is that two extremely thoughtful, smart, loving people, as parents, may not always produce the child that they think they would. I mean, in my family, my brother and I have the same parents, and we had vastly different childhoods. And so I imagine for your grandparents, it must have been really heartening on a deep level to be able to live the lives that they wanted to lead and have a child, I don't want to say fall into line, but do respond as they would have expected.
In a way that their firstborn, my biological mother, did not. You know, again, the whole, nature versus nurture. She was raised in this environment with two loving, stable, devoted, hardworking, principled parents, and she just took a path in life that just was, really counter to the environment that she was being raised in, which was an environment that was loving and really emphasized the importance of education and integrity.
Having witnessed that, as you became a parent, you knew two things. You knew first about that core. I mean, how that core what it looks like, how you can do it. But you also you understood that it can go awry. You don't wish adversity on anyone, but it really can, if you can get through it, it provides you with some tools that ultimately you may need.
Sure. I mean, I definitely have the adversity that I went through when I did have the periods where I was really kind of pulled away from, physically from being in my grandparents' home. And again, that was that was certainly very traumatic.
Right.
But I got to a point where I had my own agency and I could make my own decisions. I stopped having any communication with her because it was that bad. And so, projecting forward as a parent, though, I certainly had that experience that informed what I did not want to do as a parent. So I wanted to be as stable, as loving, as present, and just this whole notion of abandonment, just never abandon them, which even though she, quote unquote, abandoned me into the arms of my grandparents, which I'm thankful for that, there's still, as a child, that there's an abandonment. And I'm sure, she probably emotionally wasn't well, but it really did inform how I wanted to interact and be present and connect with my children.
So fast forward to your children. You have Cole and Ella, and I should say that you were married to Greg Anthony at the time, and he was a professional basketball player. And so Cole and Ella are coming up in a vastly different world than you did, in the sense that their father is a celebrity, they're sharing him with the world. And then, lo and behold, each of them develops a passion for the sport. Mm-hmm. So let's start with Cole. I know, because I remember Cole from when he was younger, that he always had a lot of energy.
Oh, yeah. The spirited child. Thank goodness for the literature out there and a strong village of people around me to help raise that child.
He was bouncy. He was very, very spirited, very bouncy. So did you try to steer that into a sport, or was it that he was always sports-minded?
He was just always very high energy. Mm-hmm. Athletic at a very young age. He would, by the time he could just sit in one spot, he could throw a ball overhand, probably at 6, 7 months. He'd be sitting in one spot, a ball would go in his hand, he'd throw it overhand like perfect form at a really young age. And he also walked at an early age. I think he probably started walking around 8.5 months.
Wow.
And he was had more physical gifts before he became verbal. Mm-hmm. And he was also very competitive at a young age. Mm-hmm. I didn't know what direction it was going to go in, but again, interestingly enough, the first time I realized just how competitive he was, he was about 3 years old. And we were outside in the city with Jackson, mm-hmm. his buddy, Tanya's son.
Jackson Lee.
Jackson Lee. And Jackson's like 3.5, 4 years older than Cole. And they decided to have a race from like one, east-west block, which are the long blocks mm-hmm. in New York City. And they raced their little hearts out. And Jackson won, but he won by a hair. And Cole was inconsolable at 3 years old. He was just absolutely inconsolable. And I was trying to calm down. Tanya was, Jackson was. We're like, you're only 3. You did a great job. You almost beat him. And
he's
said,
3 and Jackson's what?
7 or 8. Okay. 7 or 8 years old. The difference right. with that. And we were like, why are you so upset? And he said, my feet are supposed to be faster than his. Huh. At 3 years old. And so that was like my first clue as a mom, just how competitive he was. Mm-hmm. And at that point, we just knew that we had to get him involved in activities where he could have a physical outlet. So we exposed him to everything from, the t-ball to soccer to basketball, dodgeball. I felt bad for those other kids, though.
Did he land on basketball, or did he do a lot of things? At some point, he got very intense about basketball.
Yes, he did. And part of that was more of a construct of how competitive kids' sports are going. So it used to be where the kids that played sports in middle school, or particularly high school, more so high school, they weren't getting involved in the sports as intensely at as young of an age as they do now. Mm-hmm. And they could play a sport. They could play 3-4 sports. And it just got to a point where he loved basketball. We let him play a little football in middle school, which of course I did not like because mommy couldn't stand the head banging. But it got to a point where if he was going to be serious about basketball, he just really needed to be competing pretty much around the year because his competitors and his contemporaries were. Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about Ella, who is also supremely talented in basketball. And we've talked about this before, but her interests have gone around to a lot of different things. She didn't sort of start at 3 trying to play basketball. Did she pick it up a little later?
Yeah, she was a late bloomer with basketball. Ella has had lots of other interest. She just, is intellectually curious. Mm-hmm. And she great artist, great singer. She's
that's right. She has a great voice.
Yes, yes, she really does. And she started playing basketball probably in 7th or 8th grade. And that's kind of late, for people who get serious about it. But since she has committed herself to basketball, though, I will say this: she's not necessarily the fastest. She's not the tallest. But nobody's going to work harder than her. She has this supreme work ethic. And so at the levels that she's been playing in high school and on the AAU circuit, she really has thrived. And she will play in college. She's going to do a post-grad year after graduating from high school. And so she'll do one more year. She's a young senior in high school to really sort of improve her craft. But what I will say just about raising kids that have talents, athletic or otherwise, and I've seen it with other friends whose children have high-level talents, whether they're a prodigy musically, athletically, or chess players. You have some parents who really just drive their kids. Again, I don't know enough about them to know whether or not the kids would have become, singers or, super successful tennis players, but for their parents really pushing them relentlessly, or if they would not have gone down that path. We've never been like that. We've never been relentlessly driving Cole or Ella. He has let us know that, it was probably 7th or 8th grade where he said, okay, I just want to focus on basketball. I want that to be my sport. At that point, he had shown some level of talent. So at that point, he guided us. And then we said, so if you're going to do this, then you've got to put everything into it. But he continued to up the ante himself because of his interest and talent.
So I imagine it was helpful, but not sort of the only thing to have a parent that has gone through it. I mean, I noticed in the league there are some legacy basketball.
Oh, yeah, there are a lot now. That's Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Doc Rivers' son. That's Austin Rivers. I mean, lots.
Yes, and it makes sense. It makes sense on many fronts, but you can attain something. If you see something that is attainable, it just gives you the confidence that it's not this pipe dream that, you can't ever imagine.
Well, you have to have the talent too.
Oh, absolutely. Right. And because that is such a tall order, such a high bar, it goes without saying that in fact, you would think you would have more often someone following in the footsteps of a parent who is a professional, that it wouldn't happen because there would be this expectation, and you fall short because you need more than just good DNA.
That's right.
You need, and in addition to the personal drive, you also need a parent, a guardian, somebody who is schlepping you around who is starting with you in middle school or wherever it starts and giving up all of their weekends and I mean, lovingly, but still giving up.
And then, but I will say this, Carol, sort of the insider peeling the layers back of this world. What does happen with these high-level basketball players, and these don't even have to be players that are, projected to play professionally. Basketball is such an industry now on the high school level. It's such a business that many parents aren't even required or don't even necessarily go and schlep their kids around on a high school level because you have these AAU teams that are sponsored, financed from Nike. Nike's the biggest on the EYBL circuit. Nike or Adidas or Under Armour, where at least on the boys basketball front, all of the expenses are paid. And they're travel teams too. It's not even so from just the parenting perspective of the parents schlepping around. Of course, the parents are still. Many of them are still going. Just the ante is that much higher, and the stakes are higher, and there are more eyeballs, and it's college coaches coming, and it's being filmed by various different outlets, and it's a business. So even when your kid's not getting paid.
Wow, I can imagine so many people have pipe dreams of their very talented 8-year-old. Being so good, continuing to be as good as everyone says that they are now, and that there's a path to professionalism. And I'm sure you get asked that a lot. And I'm sure you've seen the streets are littered with people who were trying and just couldn't make it, couldn't even get to college to be recruited for college basketball. How do parents get to the moment to realize that their child may not be
Are you talking about like the dream killer moment?
Right. I guess you may not have had it, but you may have been around other parents. I mean, because people who are listening who have these superstar kids, it's a long road from a superstar 8-year-old to even getting them into college.
And more often, I mean, it's interesting because there's some kids, for instance, that Cole played basketball with, in 4th and 5th grade. Like, remember my movie that I did, Little Ballers, for Nickelodeon, and there was a group of kids. Cole was one of those kids in the film, and I think we filmed them when they were in 4th and 5th grade, and he wasn't even starting in 4th and 5th grade. There were, a couple of kids who could way better handle than him and better shooter and bigger and, faster and so on and so forth. And the majority of them from that team aren't even playing anymore.
Oh, interesting.
But, and then a couple of the kids just didn't have any offers to play in college. So that changes. But it's interesting that you brought like some of these 8-year-old kids. Ray and I were at a game. Leo also does play on a little, team, little basketball team.
I'm just going to cut in and say, because I haven't yet, that Ray is Ray McGuire, who is Crystal's husband and happens to be a dear friend of mine and my husband's as well. But okay, so back you were saying Leo is playing.
Yes, our son Leo, who's 7 years old, he's playing on a little team now. And he just enjoys it. He plays chess, he plays soccer. Again, we're just letting him be a kid and have some fun and learn some discipline and teamwork, et cetera. But we were at a game the other day, and one of the parents, who's a parent on one of the kids on Leo's team, who's like a big basketball dad. He has 2 older sons. They're twins that play. And, Ray and I are watching the game, and he, leans over and says to us, he says, hey, see that kid so-and-so, that number playing against, guarding my son? He said, yeah. And this is a kid that's 7 years old. He said, yeah, his mom is homeschooling him now, and his dad plays basketball with him and does drills with him 4 hours a day. He's being homeschooled so they can focus 4 hours a day, every day during the week, on basketball. And what this father's banking on is his kid being able to get a college basketball scholarship.
Wow.
I hope the kid likes it as much as the father wants him to like it. I hope he stays healthy. All sorts of variables that go into that.
Yeah. So if anyone out there is thinking about this, just remember, it's not about you and your hoop dreams. Your child may wake up one day and say, that was fun, but I really don't want to do that anymore.
Right.
So I want to switch the subject a little. It still has to do with your family, but I want to talk a little bit about a different angle on your family, and that is the blended nature of your family. In that, as we've said, you were married to Greg Anthony. You guys have Cole and Ella, and both you and Greg have remarried. You to Ray, and you guys have Leo, and Greg is married to Cherie and has Tyson and Naomi. And so what I've said to you on many occasions is how impressed I am that you all managed to be a wonderful family unit. And it is in a world where you hear so much about families that can't do that either for whatever reason the parents can't see their way to, when their children evolve, their way towards embracing the concept of new families. I would love to just hear, what would you say to parents who are sort of at the moment where they are separating or they're ended their marriage and they've just decided to remarry? What are the things that you need to know or do in order to try to make that happen? I mean, you can't guarantee it, but what can you do to try to help it happen?
So, obviously a divorce under the best circumstances has challenges. And then you factor in having kids, and that's another layer of complexity. But I think what my mindset was, we were always going to make decisions based on how can we keep the kids emotionally healthy. Number one. And then everything else just flowed from that. And essentially is us being at odds, us arguing and having a contentious relationship was not going to be in the best interest of Cole and Ella. And we both got that. And I'm not saying that it was always easy, because it definitely was not easy, but I made a vow that I was just not going to ever say to the kids anything negative about their father. And I think he did the same of me. And then I think we were also very fortunate, because the partners we chose to marry were both really good people as well, which helped tremendously. I mean, and so Greg's wife, Cherie, the kids she's just always been loving and supportive of Cole and Della, treats them like her own. And Ray, loving, supportive of Cole and Ella, and that's not to say that it's, the perfect situation, because there are other types of issues just with blended families, but I think that if there's one thing that we got right in the divorce, the separation, the divorce, and then each of us eventually remarrying, it was really keeping the kids first, not our egos or our feelings.
That is key. I often say when I'm talking to friends that are sort of in some sort of conflict, like, somebody's got to be the adult here. And it sounds like both of you were the adults there and were able to sort of step away from whatever you might be encountering to just step back and be an adult and do the right thing. So that's really great. That's really, I think that is really important. I personally I've seen Ray interact with your kids. I know how much love there is in the entire family. It's easy to see. And so that's a credit to you and to Greg for making that happen. So just a couple of more questions. Now, I got to ask you this on behalf of moms everywhere. So you've got 3 children. One is taking up a lot of time in terms of his profession thus far. Another one in that same vein, a 7-year-old, and you're a filmmaker. The question is, what gives you confidence as a parent, and how do you get all of this? What's the juggling? How do you get it all done? And so how do you approach it so that you feel like you're confident in what you're doing as a parent and as a professional?
Right. Well, it's not easy. Once again, it is not easy. And I don't think I don't think I'm one of those people that makes it look easy either, because it can be agonizing for the most part, and it's come down to, scheduling, organizing, a lot of nights where I just don't get sleep, where I only get a couple hours of sleep because I have a deadline. And part of my process throughout my career as a content creator has been that if I start on a project, whether it's a book, whether it's a television series, whether it's a documentary, whether it's a feature film, whatever, I have just been one of those people that I've committed to myself that come hell or high water, I'm going to complete it. Right? So what does that look like for someone like me? It might look really chaotic. And it has been chaotic. There's a method to my madness. I've been doing this long enough now where I have a vision, and I've had to wear many different caps in creating content for TV or film or other outlets. And I know how to do it now. I'm still learning. I also am one of those people, one of the expressions I learned from my husband, from Ray, you've probably heard him say it, is I also recognize that I don't know what I don't know. And what that's caused me to do is to also constantly be in a position where I'm not afraid to ask for help.
That is key. That is absolutely being able on all sides, professionally, but also from a parenting standpoint. Talk about making it look easy. I don't know. Help is always good.
Without a doubt.
This perceived nobility of doing it all yourself, I don't know where that comes from, and it doesn't make sense to subscribe to that.
Sure. And you and I'm fortunate and blessed to be able to have help.
Right.
Because probably the majority of working women, or, single moms or married moms or whatever, or don't necessarily have the luxury of having help.
This is true. Although when I'm thinking of help, I'm thinking of help paid or unpaid. I mean, just the ability to say, sure, I need somebody to be in this with me.
Sure.
I need...
It could be your village, whatever that
right,
is. It
exactly,
could be a family member that's doing it for free, a neighbor, an auntie. And
you mentioned about the fortunate thing, and my last question before I get to the bonus round has to do with that, because like I said, you and I both we're raising children in households that are different than ours. Not different emotionally. I mean, you grew up with a lot of love. I grew up with a lot of love. But resource-wise, we've been fortunate. I want to talk about how we raise children confident in their exposure to things, but at the same time knowing two things. These are Black and brown kids. First of all, that it doesn't matter what resource you have. When you walk in the store, there's a good chance the security guard is going to follow you, first of all. And then secondly, how they can stay hungry, because there's a sense that having resources makes you less hungry. Now, clearly Cole has defied that, because he's, in fact, I can't remember where I read this, but someone said he plays like he wants to buy his mama a house, which is a great line. And so how do you deal with your children? How do you deal with helping them to be confident, but having them also know that everybody doesn't have it like this, but more importantly, that's not that important. I mean, the importance is what you do and what opportunities you make for yourself and others. I mean,
yeah. Well, I mean, part of it, if I'm hearing you, how do you keep them hungry when they, listen, many of these kids, they grow up, they don't have those economic burdens, right? As let's be candid, the majority of people in this country do. So let's just start from there, as you mentioned in the case of Cole's just had this inner drive to succeed. You mentioned his father played in the NBA, and this is just Cole's makeup. Cole, I don't think he's doing this disrespectfully, but he, with whatever is within him, he looks at Greg's career and he's like, yeah, that's cool and all. He was in the NBA, but I want to be a much better player than him.
Which I'm sure Greg is fine with.
And Greg is fine with that. And Greg will say, that he played basketball because he did want to get out of the hood. That's why he was playing it. He said he wasn't as passionate about it. Cole's just passionate about it. But I think the key to keeping your kid hungry, whether you're in a home of means or not in a home of means, is whatever they're surrounded by, whatever their parents may have achieved through their education and success, you have to keep them understanding the importance of hard work, right? So you can't slack on that. And so I will say that with us, with Cole, Ella, and Leo, that is a constant refrain in our household. That is, we're never slacking up. I mean, it's always the accountability. The importance of you got to do your homework. It's never, you're on easy street. And not that you would expect that of any of us, because we know the importance of education for ourselves, what opportunities it's given us and the path it sent us on, but also just from a perspective of you want your child to be intellectually curious. Absolutely. You want your child to have, as they grow into an adult, an emotionally, mentally, psychologically, spiritually fulfilling life. Part of that is impressing upon them the importance of hard work, whatever Absolutely. They end up doing. And so I think that that's something that we have emphasized in our home. Again, could we always do better? Absolutely.
But you set the level of expectation at a high enough point so that everybody has to reach a little for it. I mean, I think that's really important to set expectations. Setting expectation, making sure that they know the importance of working hard.
Yes.
Hard work is really the ability to do that. Those muscles cannot atrophy. You have to grow. You have to build them. You have to grow. You're going to need them. You're really going to need them. And
setting, and you're right. It starts with setting those expectations, and then also being a model for
absolutely.
them. You know, because they see. I mean, Cole and Ella and Leo. I mean, they see us getting up and working every day. They see us active. They see us reading. I mean, it is a part of the DNA of our household.
Absolutely. So, Crystal, I can't tell you, I just could keep going on, but I'm going to have to wrap us here. But before I do, we're going to do the GCP bonus round, which I will end every podcast with. So 3 questions.
Okay.
First, because I do Thoughtful Thursdays and I always put poems in the blog, I'm always looking for more poems. So what's a favorite poem?
The shortest poem, and you know this one well. Probably know what I'm going to say. It's by Muhammad Ali. Me, we. Which is in the entrance of Studio Museum in Harlem, because that is, as I've grown in my work, making films and the types of films that I've been doing, they have a social justice mission to them. And my commitment to social justice, civil rights, is rooted in whatever me, Crystal, is doing. It has no value if I'm the only one benefiting from it. It has to be about the collective community.
Not only was that an excellent choice, that was an excellent explanation of the choice. So I really appreciate that. Second question. Top 2 favorite children's books. And this is good for you because you've gone back around you've done it once when the kids were older. You've gone back into the children's book cycle with Leo. So any of them stick from the first time, or do you have new favorites?
So Goodnight Moon still remains one of my favorite, that just magical book. And when I say magical, I actually really believe it's a magic book, because to this day, when I read it to Cole and Ella when they're little, and when I read it to Leo, every night I read that book to the kids, I thought I saw something different in it. Now, I know that was just probably my mind playing tricks on me.
From that lack of sleep.
That too.
Well, I love that choice. And just a quick insert that will make my oldest daughter very unhappy, but I'll do it anyway. But Tyler, my oldest, loved the book, loved the bunny in the book. And she's 27. We still have bunnies from that book around. The bunny is very important to her and to us. And so, yeah, that was a magical book. Okay.
Very sweet.
One more?
So here's the thing with Leo, very different from the older kids. He loves the series of books of what was. He likes the historical biographies for kids. And so that entire series, I probably read 30 of them to him, but it's allowing me to go back and relearn history, some that I didn't even learn growing up. So I know it's not one book, but it's just the experience of going back, and you learn so much with historical biographies.
So cool. There's so many ways that will manifest itself. You're in a museum, you see Pablo Picasso, he's going to know. That's great. That's really great. And then finally, favorite TV parent.
Ooh, favorite TV.
It can be current or it can be from back in the day.
Let me think. Gosh, that's a tough one, Carol.
It can be it can be a man or a woman. It doesn't have to be a
Right. Yeah. That's a really good question. TV, could it be film?
Sure. Sure. We got a film parent.
Don Corleone. because the Godfather series, my favorite of all times. In his children, he raised the archetypes of every person on this planet. There's a Fredo, there's a Michael, there's a Sonny, and then there's a Tom. And therein it encompasses every personality type in the universe.
Great answer, Crystal. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm going to do my little end of podcast spiel. Thank you for your parenting insights. That's not a spiel. I really hope everyone listening enjoyed the conversation and that you'll come back for more. In the meantime, please check out the Ground Control Parenting blog at www.groundcontrolparenting.com for tons of parenting info and advice. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram at Ground Control Parenting and on LinkedIn under Carol Sutton Lewis. Please send comments and questions on any of these platforms. We want to hear from you. Until next time, take care and thanks for listening.